Hello there, folks. Pliskin by 51mm here today. I've got an interesting little video topic that I figured I would do. In regards to the M1A, may as well make another video about the M1A since I'm not able to go out and shoot it because I'll burn up my 308. I may as well make some videos discussing it, just talking about it, ideas and whatnot, things I've read. Just for content's sake. Some of you may find it interesting and helpful. Other of you may find it entertaining at the least. Anyway, I was on one of Hitchcock 45's videos the other day, and I was reading the comments. It was when he was shooting his LRB M14 video, and then I watched the one where he shot the M1A in 6.5 Creedmoor. Let me pan on the M1A here. Yes, M1A, he had a 6.5 Creedmoor M1A loaded with a stainless barrel. And I'd like to own a 6.5 Creedmoor M1A someday. I'd like to see one chambered in 25 Creedmoor as well. I think that would be a really good cartridge for the platform. Anyway, I was down in the comments, and I seen somebody comment. They asked, well, why doesn't somebody just chamber an M1A in 8mm? And that kind of caught my attention because I would like to see an M1A chambered in 8mm myself. Whether it would be plausible or not or doable would be another story, but cool nonetheless. Alright, so here on the left I have 7.92 by 57mm. Also known as 8x57mm or just 8mm Mauser. This black tip bullet. It came from my tin can of Dirty Secrets over here with exotic 7.65 Argentine ammo and exotic 8mm ammo, but that's beyond the point. But anyway, this is your standard 8mm Mauser cartridge. And then here is some 7.62 by 51mm, as you can see there on the right. That is 308 7.62 NATO military ball ammo, and it came from this Federal XM80 BP XM80C CBL, and it's a 150 grain full metal jacket bullet. 40 cartridges. Last box I managed to grab before Walmart quit holding ammo for extended periods of time. So anyway, you got the old tried and true 8mm cartridge, and then you got the newer-ish, it came out in the 1950s, but tried and true in the same light, 308 7.62 NATO. And I think it would be cool if they made an M1A M14 in 8mm. It'd be really cool. You can still buy 8mm commercially on the market, but there is a catch here that would be problematic to chambering an M1A in the old German battle rifle cartridge, or at the time infantry rifle cartridge, when they fielded Mausers primarily in both World War I and World War II. Alright, so let me get my M1A's 10 rounder out here. Alright, so as we all know, the M1A M14 is chambered for 308 7.62 NATO. So the magazine, by design, is built around that cartridge. Built with that cartridge in mind, the length and everything. But if they were to make an M1A M14 variant in 8mm, this would pose the biggest problem, because the cartridge of 8mm is far too long, as you can see there, the bullet. But here rises another point too. The case length, the physical case length, would actually fit an M1A magazine, as you can see there, but you'd have to find a bullet that would be small enough. If you were to run these mags, you'd have to find a bullet that was small enough to clear that magazine lip. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So there would be the first problem in chambering an M1A in 8mm. The second problem would be the design of the M1A's receiver. Let's zoom in. Or better yet. Alright, the second problem, chambering an M1A in 8mm. Let me move my camera some more. I'm sorry for the screen. I have dropped my camera. I dropped my camera over the summer, and dirt got behind the lens, and that is now a permanent problem there. That's smudging. But another problem with the M1A chambering, rechambering one for 8mm, would be the receiver. Now the receiver for the M1A is based on the receiver for the M1 Garand. So the M1 Garand and the M14 share very similar receivers. They're almost clones of each other. But what they did with the M1A M14 is they shortened the receiver on the M14. They shortened the actual physical length of the receiver. The M1 Garand, if you put an M1 Garand and M1A next to each other, the receiver on an M1 Garand is longer. It comes back further. Back here, the receiver on an M1 Garand comes back a little farther. And the bolt too. The physical bolt in the receiver is longer on an M1 Garand. So, with the M1A M14 being push feed, when it would go to extract this cartridge, I have no doubts that an M1A M14 would probably be able to push a, because see, if you look here, I'm sorry I keep moving the camera, let me just back my view out here. I'm a little rusty, but as you can see, the 8mm cartridge is about the same length as the mag well of the M1A receiver. I mean, that right there, you know, comparison wise. See right there, I have no problem, I have no doubts a M14 would probably be able to strip an 8mm round out of a magazine up into a chamber if it had a chamber chambered for it and fire it. But I think what would you know, make it hard or probably near impossible for it to be functional with a standard length M14 chamber would be the extraction, when it would come right there to pull it back and extract it. That's just my thinking, because the safety bridge on the M1A back here to prevent the firing pin from going all the way forward would probably start binding with the back of the case of the 8mm cartridge, because it's a longer cartridge than 308. So they'd have to, best bet if they were to make an M1A or an M14 in 8mm would be just to use an M1 Garand receiver and somehow make it mag fed, kind of like a BM59, because I do believe BM59s use the exact same dimensions as the M1 Garand receiver. They're just mag fed to feed 7.62 NATO. So that would probably be, if they were to make an M1A in 8mm, that would probably be the best of both worlds, to kind of like have like a hybrid between an M1 Garand and BM59 receiver, and maybe have a little bit longer magazines to accommodate full length loaded shells to get that full length of the bullet. Because I'm not sure, I'm not entirely too sure on all the grain weights available for 8mm. We just have 8mm ammo on hand because one of my many great uncles on my dad's side of the family actually had like a K98K Mauser. See, my great uncle Charlie, he had the 7.65 1909 Argentine Mauser, and then one of his brothers had a German K98K and 8mm. They all each of the brothers, they all had like a unique rifle to one of them. And my grandpa's was his it was like an old H&R 4570, but it wasn't an H&R, it was a break open 4570. But they all had like their own rifle that they hunted and shot with. And that's where all this 8mm came from. It's just holdovers from him. I don't know what happened to the rifle. But yeah, if they were to make a M14 mag-fed in 8mm, they'd probably have to use like a hybrid M1 Garand BM59 type receiver and a little bit longer magazines. And believe it or not, there is an AK-47 variant that does shoot 8mm and has like long magazines to feed a full-length 8mm cartridge. It's called the M76, and it's fielded by Serbia, or was back in like the 1990s, 1980s. I'll put in a picture of one of them. Alright, the next thing that would probably prove problematic in chambering an M1A M14 in 8mm would be the gas system, because on the regular M1A M14 and 308, the M1A's got a self-regulating gas system. It can shoot like from 125 grain bullets to 175 safely. But if you go any higher than that, if you start shooting like 180 grain bullets, you know, if you shoot a heavy diet of 180 grain 308 bullets through it, it will eventually end up beating itself to death. And that would probably be the downfall of any ideas of chambering an M1A M14 in the 8mm. Simply because I think the starting bullet weight for 8mm is a 180 grain bullet, so that probably you'd have to fabricate a totally new gas system to accept that beefier bullet and not beat the rifle to death, but still function it. So I don't know, maybe it could be done if somebody played around with one, because a guy over in Germany, I forget what he's on YouTube, he has a YouTube channel, he made a M14 chambered and 300 Winchester short magnum, believe it or not. I gotta take a drink of water. His name was Worley or something. He's a German designer. He works with the M1A and M1 Garand style rifles over in Germany. He made a full auto like AK-47 Luger pistol hybrid too, but he made an M14 and 300 Winchester short magnum, and I was like, damn, I wish I could buy one of those, because that'd be fun. It'd be expensive, but you know, I'm all for the idea of putting having different chambered rounds in the M14, because it's already got 6.5 Creedmoor. And I've seen some other people, like on the M14 forums, they've had custom barrels made. Back in the day, Springfield Armory did chamber their M14s in like 7mm 08, 7mm 08, and then 243 Winchester and a few others. I'd like to see one in 260 Remington too. That would be a fine addition to the M14 lineup and chamber offerings, just to add some diversity with the platform. But I think if you were to chamber one on the old 8mm cartridge, 8mm Mauser, this would be where it would fall flat if you kept using the same gas system, because like I said, I'm pretty sure the starting weight for 8mm bullets, .323 8mm Mauser non-rimmed, is like 180 grain, so that would fall flat on that gas system unless you got an adjustable gas plug, but even then I don't know. But that's where the design would run into issues. You'd have to make a new gas system of some kind. So anyway, that was my thoughts on the 8mm M1A M14 hybrid rifle. Just my thoughts and opinions on it. I would like to, personally, I would love to see an M1A M14 in 8mm. Yeah, it would probably be expensive, and yeah, it would probably be just like kind of like, well, why would you get that when you could just get like an M1 Garand and 30-06 type deal? But let's be honest here. Who seriously wants, you know, like less guns and weird calibers, honestly? And I'm the kind of guy that I like the oddball type firearms. I mean, I love, you know, M14 and 308, AR-15s and 5.56. I like the standard caliber rifles, chambered and, you know, commonly available cartridges. I love that, but I'm also the type of guy that likes to see the weird, like, left field type guns that are chambered in them weird old calibers that, you know, they're not really around anymore, just for, you know, diversity's sake. I guess I ought to say, for diversity's sake on the firearms. I just find it interesting. So an 8mm M1A, if one such rifle ever did manifest in wide numbers on the market, I would probably end up with one. Just, you know, just because you know, because why not? You know, if they offer it, why not bite the bullet and get one? Because 8mm isn't going anywhere. Yeah, it's not as common as, say, like 7.62 by 54R from the same era of, you know, firearms, you know, the Mosin Nagant cartridge. It's not as common as that cartridge anymore, but you can still buy it. You know, Privy Partisan makes 8mm by the truckloads over in Serbia. So, you know, you could still feed it. I just think that if they were to do it, if they were to make an M1A M14 in 8mm, it would be a very, very, like, it'd be a very hybrid rifle. They'd have to make a longer receiver and then change the gas system slightly, reinforce it, beef it up so it could handle the bigger bullet, and then they'd have to find a magazine that would feed, that would lock up into the gun, feed and cycle properly through it. So I don't see it happening. Even though as cool as it would be, I don't see an 8mm M1A ever being manifested. But who knows? There is a guy somewhere, you know, custom job, that made an FNFAL in 8mm. I kid you not. So never say never. It'd probably more likely be a custom job, nonetheless. A custom rifle, which would be cool too. Just to see one put together and fire would be good enough for me. I mean, I'd like to own one, an 8mm M14, but just seeing somebody, you know, having made a actual functioning version that could you know, shoot out to 100 yards and cycle and fire properly would be good enough for me. Well, anyway, guys, I figured I'd do this little video just to have something to upload, talk about some guns. We may be getting to the range sometime this week. I don't know. The weather's wishy-washy, starting to rain now. But if we go, we'll be shooting some handguns. Probably be shooting the little ram, the little steel ram. And that's it. Well, anyway, guys, it's been Pliskin by 51mm. I'll see you guys all in the next video.